My name's Amelia, and I've got a story to tell you. I grew up in what you'd call an ordinary family: mom, dad, and a little sister named Lily. Sounds nice, right? Well, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Lily was difficult, to put it mildly. She was the kind of kid who'd scream bloody murder if she didn't get her way. And boy, did she know how to work our parents. They'd bend over backwards just to keep her from throwing one of her famous tantrums. "Amelia, honey," my mom would say, her voice strained, "could you please let Lily have the last cookie? You know how she gets." And I'd nod, because what else could I do? I was the good girl, the one who didn't make waves. I learned early on that it was easier to fade into the background than to compete with Hurricane Lily. As we grew older, the pattern stayed the same. Lily demanded, our parents caved, and I just tried to stay out of the way. I buried myself in books and schoolwork, dreaming of the day I could leave it all behind. That day finally came when I got accepted to college on a full-ride scholarship. As I packed my bags, I felt a mix of excitement and guilt. Excitement for the new life waiting for me, and guilt for leaving my parents to deal with Lily alone. But I pushed that guilt down deep. It was time for me to live my own life. The next morning, as I loaded my beat-up old car with everything I owned, my mom hugged me tight. "We're so proud of you, Amelia," she whispered. "You're going to do great things." Dad clapped me on the shoulder, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Remember, you can always come home if you need to." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Lily watched from the porch, arms crossed, not saying a word. College was like a breath of fresh air. For the first time in my life, I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone's feelings or give up what I wanted. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make the most of this opportunity. Meanwhile, life back home continued as usual. Lily, predictably, didn't move out. Instead, she married her high school sweetheart, Tom, right after graduation. And where did they decide to live? With our parents, of course. I'd get calls from Mom every now and then, her voice tired but trying to sound upbeat. "Lily and Tom are still settling in," she'd say. "It's nice having the grandkids around." But I could read between the lines. Lily was using our parents as free childcare and housekeeping. She'd pop out 2 kids in quick succession, all while never holding down a job. Tom worked, sure, but from what I gathered, he wasn't exactly bringing home the big bucks. One day, during a rare visit home, I overheard Lily talking to Mom in the kitchen. "Mom, can you watch the kids tonight? Tom and I want to go out." "Lily, honey, your father and I had plans." "Oh, come on. It's not like you have anything important to do. We never get a night off." I peeked around the corner to see Mom's shoulders slump in defeat. "All right, dear. We'll watch them." It made my blood boil, but what could I say? I was the one who'd left, after all. So I bit my tongue and focused on my own life. After graduation, I landed a job at an international company as a manager. It wasn't easy. I worked long hours, took on extra projects, did whatever it took to get ahead. But it paid off. Within a few years, I was head of my department. While Lily was demanding our parents buy her groceries, I was saving every penny I could. It wasn't glamorous, no fancy clothes or wild nights out for me. But slowly, surely, I built up my savings. First came the apartment. Nothing fancy, just a small 1-bedroom, but it was mine. I remember the day I got the keys, standing in the empty living room, hardly able to believe it was real. Then the car. Again, nothing flashy, but reliable and paid for in full. All the while, I kept my head down and worked hard. I didn't have much of a social life, but that was okay. I was building something for myself, something no one could take away. Dating? It wasn't really on my radar. I went out occasionally, but nothing serious. That is, until I met Jake. Jake was different from the start. He didn't try to impress me with fancy restaurants or smooth talk. Instead, he challenged me, made me laugh, and most importantly, he respected my drive. "You're something else, Amelia," he said on our third date, shaking his head in admiration. "Most people would be burned out, working as hard as you do. But you're thriving." I shrugged, a little uncomfortable with the praise. "I just know what I want, that's all." He reached across the table and took my hand. "Well, I know what I want too. And it's you, Amelia." For the first time in years, I felt my carefully constructed walls start to crumble. Maybe, just maybe, there was room in my life for more than just work and saving money. Jake and I dated for a few years before he finally popped the question. I'll be honest, I was hesitant at first. Marriage wasn't something I'd given much thought to, always focused on my career and financial stability. But Jake, he had a way of making me see beyond my self-imposed limitations. The day of the wedding arrived, and despite my reservations, I was excited. This was my day, after all. I was marrying the man I loved. Then Lily showed up. My sister waltzed into the bridal suite wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously bridal. "Oh, Amelia," she exclaimed, twirling around. "Don't you love my dress? I wanted to look my best for your big day." I stared at her, speechless. Was she seriously trying to upstage me at my own wedding? "Lily," I finally managed, "don't you think that dress is a bit inappropriate for a bridesmaid?" She pouted, looking around at our cousins who were helping me get ready. "What do you mean? I think I look great." "Don't I look great, girls?" Our cousins, not wanting to cause a scene, mumbled awkward agreements. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was my day. I wasn't going to let Lily's antics ruin it. "It's fine," I said, turning back to the mirror. "Let's just get this show on the road." The ceremony itself was beautiful. Jake's eyes lit up when he saw me walking down the aisle, and in that moment, all the stress and family drama faded away. This was about us, about our love and our future together. But at the reception, things got interesting. More than once, I overheard guests asking Lily if she was the bride. She'd giggle and say, "Oh no, that's my sister. But doesn't this dress look amazing on me?" Jake, bless him, did his best to keep me calm. "Don't let it get to you," he whispered, squeezing my hand. "Everyone knows you're the star of this show." And he was right. Despite Lily's best efforts, the day was still ours. We danced, we laughed, we celebrated with our friends and family. And at the end of the night, as Jake and I drove off to start our honeymoon, I felt a sense of peace. After the wedding, Jake and I settled into a rhythm. We moved into his apartment, which was bigger and in a nicer area than mine. I decided to keep my old place and rent it out, just another investment for the future, I thought. I threw myself back into work with renewed energy. Jake was supportive, always there with a cup of coffee when I was burning the midnight oil or a shoulder to lean on when deals fell through. But it wasn't just about work anymore. I started looking into investments, particularly securities. It was a whole new world, full of risks and potential rewards. And payoff it did. 5 years flew by, and suddenly we found ourselves sitting on a decent nest egg. That's when I had an idea. "Let's buy a vacation home," I suggested to Jake one evening. "Somewhere my parents could use too, to get away from everything." Jake knew what I meant by everything. My sister, her husband, their 3 kids, it was a lot for my parents to handle. We found the perfect place, a beautiful villa on a lake, just outside the city. It had everything, a large barbecue area, a sprawling terrace, 3 bedrooms, and a view that took your breath away. The moment I saw it, I knew it was the one. The day we closed the deal, I called my parents. "Mom, Dad, I've got a surprise for you," I said, barely containing my excitement. When they arrived at the villa, my mom's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Amelia," she whispered, looking around in awe. This is too much." Dad was speechless, running his hand along the smooth kitchen countertop like he couldn't believe it was real. "It's not too much," I insisted. "You deserve this. A place to relax, to get away from. From your sister, Dad finished, a hint of guilt in his voice. I nodded. But listen, there's one thing. Can we not tell Lily that I bought this? Can we say it's yours? That you bought it with your savings? Mom looked confused. But why? I sighed, thinking about the phone call I'd had with Lily just the day before. She'd asked to borrow money for a car, and I'd said no. I could only imagine how she'd react if she found out about this place. It's just easier this way, I said. Please? They agreed, albeit reluctantly. Little did I know the storm this white lie would stir up. A few days later, I got a call from Mom. She sounded exhausted. Lily found out about the villa, she said. She wants us to sell it. Says we should give her the money instead, so she can buy a sports car and travel the world. I could feel my blood pressure rising. And what did you say? We said no, of course. But Amelia, it was bad. She screamed, she cried. Said we loved you more, that we always favored you. I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar mixture of guilt and frustration. I'm so sorry, Mom. I never meant to cause trouble. It's not your fault, sweetie, Mom said, but I could hear the weariness in her voice. Your father and we've decided to move to the villa. Full-time. We can't do this anymore. As I hung up the phone, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. My parents were finally standing up for themselves, finally taking a step back from Lily's chaos. But at the same time, a sense of unease settled in my stomach. I knew this wasn't the end of it. Lily wouldn't let this go without a fight. It was a sunny Saturday when Jake and I decided to surprise my parents with a visit to the villa. But as we got closer, something felt off. The sound of loud music filled the air, and I could see cars parked haphazardly on the lawn. We pulled up to the villa, and the scene that greeted us was chaos. People were everywhere, drinking, laughing, kids running around screaming. And right in the middle of it all was Lily, holding court like she owned the place. When she saw us, her eyes narrowed. What are you doing here? I looked around, trying to spot my parents. Where's Mom and Dad? Lily waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Mom's out walking with the kids. Dad's gone to get more meat for the barbecue. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You sent them out? While you're having a party? It's a celebration, Lily exclaimed. We're christening the new family vacation home. Not that you'd understand, Miss Workaholic. I felt my blood begin to boil. Lily, this isn't. She cut me off. Look, Amelia, why don't you and Jake just leave? Your sour face is going to ruin everyone's mood. I stood there, speechless. Jake put his hand on my arm. Come on, he said quietly. Let's go. As we drove away, I couldn't shake the image of Lily lording over my villa, the villa I'd bought for our parents. I can't believe her, I fumed. Using Mom and Dad like that, treating the place like it's hers. Jake sighed. Maybe it's just a one-time thing? But it wasn't. Over the next few weeks, I heard from Mom about the constant stream of parties and get-togethers Lily was hosting at the villa. And when she wasn't partying, she was dumping her kids on our parents. The kids are missing school, Mom confided in me during one of our calls. She sounded exhausted. Lily says it's not a big deal for Tommy, he's only 4. But Emily and Jack are falling behind. By the way, I forgot to mention that Lily gave birth to her 3rd child shortly after my wedding. I'd had enough. The next time I saw Lily, I confronted her. You need to stop taking advantage of Mom and Dad, I said. They're not your personal babysitters. And the kids need to be in school. Lily rolled her eyes. Don't be such a killjoy, Amelia. Mom and Dad love having the kids around. But I could see the toll it was taking on our parents. They looked tired, worn down. This wasn't the peaceful retirement I'd envisioned for them when I bought the villa. After several more failed attempts to reason with Lily, I made a difficult decision. I contacted Child Protective Services. The investigation was quick and discreet. Lily got a formal reprimand, and suddenly, the kids were back in school full-time. The endless parties at the villa stopped too. Mom called me a few days later. "Things have calmed down," she said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Your father and I are actually getting to enjoy the place now." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This was what I'd wanted all along, for my parents to have a peaceful place to retire. But my relief was short-lived. The next time I saw Lily, her eyes were full of venom. "I know what you did," she spat. "Calling CPS on your own sister. You're a traitor, Amelia. I'll never forgive you for this." A few months passed quickly. It was my mom's birthday, and Jake and I decided to surprise her with a weekend visit to the villa. We had visions of a quiet family celebration, maybe a nice dinner on the terrace overlooking the lake. But as we pulled up to the house, those dreams quickly evaporated. The place was in chaos. Music blared from speakers, people were everywhere, and kids were running wild across the lawn. It looked like Lily had invited half the town. We made our way inside, where I found Mom in the kitchen, looking exhausted and on the verge of tears. "Happy birthday, Mom," I said, giving her a hug. She clung to me a little too tightly. "Oh, Amelia," she whispered. "I just wanted a quiet day with family." "But Lily, she invited all these people. Your father and I have been running around all day, serving drinks, cooking food." I stepped out onto the lawn, searching for Lily in the crowd. When I spotted her, laughing with a group of friends, I marched over. "Lily, we need to talk," I said firmly. "This is Mom's birthday. She wanted a family day, not this." I gestured at the chaos around us. Lily laughed loudly. "Oh, lighten up. Mom loves having people over. Stop being such a buzzkill." Frustrated, I walked over to a group of guests near the speakers. "Excuse me," I said, raising my voice to be heard over the music. "Could you please turn this down? It's too loud." The guests, clearly drunk, just laughed and turned the volume up higher. As I stood there, trying to figure out what to do next, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Lily was huddled with a group of kids, pointing in my direction and giggling. With horror, I realized she was handing them ice cream cones and encouraging them to throw them at me. Before I could react, the first scoop of ice cream flew past my head. I ducked, and it hit a woman behind me square in the face. Chaos erupted. More ice cream was flying, kids were screaming, and adults were yelling. Lily's voice rose above the commotion. "Look what you've done, Amelia. You're ruining everything, as usual." The crowd, fueled by alcohol and Lily's accusations, started to turn ugly. Men and women were shouting, moving towards Jake and me with clenched fists. I felt Jake's hand on my arm. "Amelia, we need to get out of here," he said urgently. But I'd had enough. This was my parents' home, the home I'd bought for them. This had to stop. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "I'm calling the police," I announced loudly. The police arrived quickly, lights flashing. As it turned out, they'd already received noise complaints from the neighbors. "Who owns this property?" one of the officers asked. I stepped forward. "I do. I'm Amelia Johnson. My parents live here, but these people," I gestured to the crowd, "are here without my invitation." The officers nodded and quickly got to work, ushering the drunk guests off the property and warning them about the consequences of starting a fight. As the police cars drove away with the last of the uninvited guests, an eerie silence fell over the villa. The aftermath of the chaotic party was strewn all around, empty bottles, discarded plates, and the lingering tension in the air. Lily stood in the middle of the living room, her face a mix of shock and anger. "What do you mean, this is your house?" she demanded, her voice shrill. I took a deep breath. "I bought it. For Mom and Dad to retire in peace." "You?" Lily's eyes narrowed. Then, suddenly, her demeanor changed. A sly smile spread across her face. Well, Little Miss Perfect. always full of surprises. She sauntered over to me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Listen, Amelia. Let's forget about this little misunderstanding. I've got a proposition for you. I raised an eyebrow, wary. What are you talking about? This property, Lily gestured around grandly. It's got potential. Why don't you sign it over to me? I could build a few more houses, rent them out. I've been looking for a passive income opportunity for ages. You've already got your fancy job. Why not help your sister out? Absolutely not, I said firmly. This house is for Mom and Dad. It's not for sale or development. Lily's face darkened. You'll regret this, Amelia. Mark my words. With that, she stormed out, her husband and kids trailing behind her. I turned to Mom, who looked shell-shocked. I'm so sorry, Mom. This isn't how your birthday was supposed to go. To my surprise, she pulled me into a hug. Oh, honey. Thank you for standing up for us. For everything. I spent the rest of the day helping Mom clean up the mess, but Lily's threat kept echoing in my mind. I knew my sister well enough to know she wouldn't let this go easily. Before Jake and I left, I made a decision. I hired a security company to install hidden cameras around the property and set up an alarm system that would alert my phone if anyone entered the grounds. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with an alert from the villa's security system. Someone had entered the property. Worried it might be a false alarm triggered by my parents, I called Mom. Mom, are you and Dad at the villa? There was a pause. No, honey. We're back at the old house. Lily, she insisted we come help with the kids. We'd been here for a week. My heart sank. I told Mom I'd call her back and immediately headed for the villa with Jake. The sight that greeted us was heartbreaking. The beautiful home I'd bought for my parents was in shambles. Furniture was overturned, things were strewn everywhere, and there was even some graffiti on the walls. Fury rose in me as I called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the security footage. There was no doubt, it was Lily and her husband, vandalizing the property in a drunken rage. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Lily. You need to drop the charges, she said without preamble. The police brought us in for questioning. They're talking about pressing charges for vandalism and trespassing. You have to make this go away, Amelia. I took a deep breath. No, Lily. I'm done cleaning up your messes. I'm done being the family peacekeeper at the expense of my own peace. From now on, you can talk to my lawyer. The weeks following the villa incident were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and family drama. I was determined to see this through, to finally put an end to Lily's destructive behavior. I had the villa professionally cleaned and repaired, carefully documenting every bit of damage. The bill came to just over $10,000. My lawyer advised me to sue for the full amount, and after some soul-searching, I agreed. The day of the court hearing arrived. I sat on one side of the courtroom, Lily and her husband on the other. She wouldn't even look at me. The judge listened to both sides, reviewed the evidence, including the security camera footage. In the end, his decision was clear. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, he announced. The defendants are ordered to pay $10,000 in damages. But that wasn't all. Due to the nature of the crime and the clear evidence, the judge also handed down a suspended sentence for trespassing and property damage. The aftermath of the trial hit Lily and her family hard. Her husband, who'd always coasted by on charm and family connections, suddenly found himself struggling to find work. No one wanted to hire someone with a criminal record, even if it was suspended. Lily, who'd never worked a day in her life, was forced to find a job. I heard through the grapevine that she was waiting tables at a local diner, coming home exhausted every night. As for me, I made the difficult decision to cut ties completely. I issued a legal notice, barring Lily from the villa, and ceased all communication with her. It was painful, but necessary. Mom and Dad, finally free from Lily's constant demands, moved into the villa full-time. The change in them was remarkable. They looked years younger, more relaxed than I'd seen them in decades. "We should have done this years ago," Dad told me during one of my monthly visits. "We love having the grandkids over, but now it's on our terms. A few hours at a time and then back to our peaceful life." They'd left their old house to Lily, a final act of parental kindness, but made it clear that the financial support stopped there. It was time for Lily to stand on her own 2 feet. As for me, life was looking up. Work was going well, my relationship with Jake was stronger than ever, and then we got some unexpected news. "I'm pregnant," I told Jake one evening, my voice shaking with excitement and nervousness. His face lit up like a Christmas tree. He picked me up and spun me around, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. As I write this, I'm 6 months along. We're having a little girl. Jake and I are busy preparing the nursery, reading every parenting book we can get our hands on. I still think about Lily sometimes. Last I heard, she and her husband were fighting constantly, teetering on the edge of divorce. Part of me feels sad for her, for the mess she's made of her life. But a bigger part of me feels free. Free from the obligation to always fix her problems, to be the peacekeeper at the expense of my own happiness.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1, if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, "I'm moving to the sales department soon." If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. "Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it." On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. "Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived." I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. "They look good." "What are you talking about?" "These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. "Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay?" I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. "Yes, I'm inviting my father." "That's great. I might invite my parents too." I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.